Broadcasting. There we go. Thank you. Hey everybody. First and foremost, thank you very much for turning up to another LIDNUG Q&A with Scott Guthrie. A very quick introduction of Scott. I mean, he's the Executive Vice President for pretty much Azure and also now Windows development, as I understand it. Scott has previously been doing 18 of these Q&As, ranging from an hour to an hour and a half. His record in questions was 132 in 90 minutes. Without ado, I'm going to hand over to Scott. Scott, welcome, and thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this Q&A.
My pleasure. It's great to be able to do it again. It's been too long since the last one, and looking forward to the discussions.
Fantastic, fantastic. There's been so many news around Microsoft lately. Anything you want to highlight before we dive into the questions?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been it's been a busy past year in terms of lots of things happening across the developer space here at Microsoft. Specifically, some of the great things, obviously, on the Azure side, which has been a lot of my primary focus the last couple of years. We've really come a massively long way in terms of capability, and continue to ship pretty much on a daily basis tons of improvements and new capabilities, whether it's around containers, whether it's around serverless, whether it's around Cosmos DB, which is our kind of geo-scale database, whether it's around our SQL, Postgres, and MySQL databases, the services offerings, IoT, and a lot more. I think Azure's really evolved into a pretty awesome developer platform, and one that you can really build some amazing solutions with. And then, more broadly, what we're seeing is kind of an exciting new world of not just using the cloud as infrastructure and for application development, but also really integrating data and AI in a much more fundamental way in terms of the solutions that are being built. And then going forward, really using the edge, meaning the devices that are running, whether it's Windows Client, whether it's IoT, whether it's big or small embedded solutions, to really build what we call intelligent edge and intelligent cloud solutions. And that's a lot of my focus going forward. And I think a few people have already asked, and maybe you've heard of some of the organizational announcements we made about 2 weeks ago here at Microsoft. And so my team is now the Cloud and AI team at Microsoft, which is sort of one of the two big engineering teams in the company. And that includes Azure, that includes all of our data platform, Dynamics 365, and our business applications, Visual Studio, .NET. And then also management security, and it also now includes all of our AI technology, both in terms of core AI platform, but also what we call our AI perception capabilities like HoloLens, as well as speech detection, as well as visual detection, as well as the core Windows operating system team. Windows Client is actually in a different part of the company, but in terms of the core Windows OS, as well as a lot of the core developer platform pieces, are now part of my team as well. So it's a relatively new change, and I think it's going to enable us to build even better end-to-end platforms that can really take advantage of this intelligent cloud, intelligent edge world. So one thing I also mentioned before we start diving into the questions is that we have our Build Developer Conference coming up in about a month, and that is here in Seattle. There's still a few seats left if you hurry. And I think you'll find that is a pretty exciting conference. I'm going to be doing a keynote on the first day along with Satya, and we're going to go much deeper into this sort of intelligent cloud, intelligent edge vision, and you're going to see a whole bunch of really cool new technology demos and announcements. And so it'd be great to have you live. And there's lots and lots of sessions throughout the conference. You'll also be able to watch it streamed online, the keynotes, and so hope you join me there as well. So with that, should we open up to questions? So I guess I picked the questions. Let's see. I think someone asked 2 minutes ago, there's been a lot of talk about Microsoft moving Windows as an OS into Azure. Is there any truth to that? I mentioned just a few minutes ago, yes, there is actually truth to that. What we did is kind of a broad organization of our engineering team in the company, and we kind of now have two big teams, and I run one of those big teams. One of them is an experiences and devices team, which includes Windows Client, it includes Surface, it includes Office 365, and kind of think of it as our per user experiences and services and apps. And then the Cloud and AI team, which is what I run, which includes Azure, it includes the core operating system team. So think of it as the kernel team in Windows, the application platform team in Windows, as well as the Windows Server and the IoT technology in Windows. And then also includes our data platform, Dynamics 365, and our business applications, security management, Visual Studio, .NET, and a few more things. So we're one, and all of our AI technology in particular. So yeah, it's a kind of a big change. And our whole goal behind it is really, how do we enable an even richer platform, both that again spans both the cloud and client and edge devices, and you'll hear more about that even starting it in the build time frame in a month, I'm looking forward to getting more into the client space again, and should be fun and a whole bunch of cool stuff coming. Let's see, a couple other questions. Someone asked a question about, I've been asked on a number of occasions by my clients, can they set up their own private Azure running on their own hardware? If not now, then ever. Yes, you can actually now. We have with Azure, there's obviously the Azure that people think about that's running in the public cloud, which is running inside Microsoft data centers around the world. We have now 50 regions of Azure around the world, where each region is typically between 3 and sometimes as many as 15 different data center buildings that are all kind of in the same campus or close together from a latency perspective. And so that's what most people think about with Azure. But there's also with Azure now both what we call Azure Stack, which is the ability to run Azure in your own data center, to your question, on customers' own hardware, and that can run disconnected from the internet. That doesn't require any access from Microsoft on top of that. It really is something that a client or a customer can run entirely by themselves, and it's useful for a variety of reasons. Whether it's offline, whether it's disconnected scenarios. You can use it for cases where you have a mainframe or another database that you're not yet ready to move to the cloud, and you need to have your apps close to it. But now you can start developing using Azure and use the Azure experience with those new apps. And it's also really useful for places in the world where either data sovereignty reasons or data residency reasons you can't yet use a public cloud environment. And Azure Stack is available today. It runs on HP, Dell, Lenovo, Cisco, and Huawei hardware. And so you can order one and have an instance of Azure now stood up in your data center in days, and be able to take advantage of it. We also then have something we call Azure IoT Edge, which is an even smaller footprint. It can run on devices as small as a Raspberry Pi, so it doesn't require servers even, it's something you can download and use. It runs on Windows and Linux, and can be used for any variety of embedded devices. Now that obviously is not a full cloud, but it does provide a lot of the core programming model services, including container management, as well as serverless-based computing, as well as our event technology, and it is ideal for building kind of embedded as well as IoT client experiences. Other questions. Someone said, I've had people tell me that Azure virtual machines are going away and we will all be able to do all the small scale we'll be able to do all the small-scale modular functions. As it's true, my app requires a full OS build with supporting software to run. Without VMs, we won't be able to use it. Don't worry, Azure virtual machines are definitely not going away. We continue to add more and more support to them. And so don't worry. I think where maybe the confusion came around is, in addition to virtual machines, we are increasingly investing more and more in container technology, as well as in what we call serverless-based computing with a capability we call Azure Functions. We also have a really nice platform service we call Azure Web Apps, which is ideal for web-based solutions. And the nice thing with each of those solutions is they run using virtual machines under the covers, so it's the same infrastructure. But they do provide for developers a nice higher-level platform abstraction that means that you're not having to patch VMs and or do a lot of the administration work of a VM. Instead, as a developer, you can build an app and you can run it in kind of this nice environment, and things like patching, things like high availability are taken care of for you. And in the case of both serverless as well as web apps and frankly containers, it does allow you to run more dense apps, which can lower your costs. And in a lot of cases with serverless, we charge you only by the CPU cycle. And so if you have an app that for part of the day is maybe only running at 20% CPU, that actually can save you a bunch of money versus what a VM would cost. So it's worth looking at those other options, but don't worry, virtual machines are definitely not going away. And we're going to support virtual machines forever inside Azure with the cloud. Let's see. So a question here is, what questions here? Will we see accelerated data center launch in Azure in Europe over Ireland, Netherlands, Germany, France, and UK? So a little bit of context. We have now lots and lots of regions in Europe that we have launched recently or announced recently. Today in general availability, we have Azure Regions in Ireland, near Dublin. We call Azure North Europe. We have Azure in a region called West Europe, which is the Netherlands. We have 2 Azure regions in the UK, one near London, one near Cardiff. That gives you kind of the ability to make sure you have a DR solution that can run entirely in the UK. If you want to, that's several hundred miles apart. And we also have regions that are now generally available in France, one in Paris and one in Marseille. So those are all generally available. You can use them today. And we have actually 2 regions in Germany that are also available and useful today. We've also then announced new regions in Switzerland. So we'll actually have 2 regions in Switzerland. We're the first cloud provider to operate in Switzerland. And we're also just announced adding 2 new regions to Germany that, in addition to the 2 that we have, that'll be coming out later this year. So we have lots in Europe. Expect to see more in Europe as well. There's obviously other countries in other parts of Europe the nice thing with cloud taking off the way it is, we're aggressively building out new data center capacity pretty much every day, expect to see more regions show up in Europe and be announced probably in the not too distant future. A couple other quick questions related to that one, maybe. Someone was asking about the UK, actually, I think. It said, does Microsoft see the UK leaving the EU as a challenge, an opportunity, or both? Good question that Mel asked. I would say broadly, one thing is we're always very careful. We're not making any statement around whether we think it's good or bad. That's something that the UK decided, and ultimately, it's making that decision. So I'd say, what we're trying to do at Microsoft is how do we best support it, support Brexit, and make sure that we enable both our customers that are in the UK and then the customers that are outside the UK to best operate and be successful, regardless, after the outcome or based on the outcome. And so, one of the things that we have done is we do have 2 Azure regions in the UK itself, which is in London and Cardiff. And so, for people that want to be able to guarantee that their data only stays in the UK and never leaves the UK boundary, I think Azure is in a unique place where we're able to provide that support because we always guarantee data residency and that your data never leaves the region you put it in. And because we have two regions, one in London and one in Cardiff, we uniquely enable disaster recovery scenarios where you can guarantee if you ever needed to fail over to a different region because there was a natural disaster or flooding or some other issue, you can actually do that and stay entirely in the UK. And that's something that no other cloud provider provides today. And then we obviously are fully certified on all UK specific certifications. And so, for example, UK GovCloud, as well as a wide variety of other certifications in health, insurance, financial space we work with as well. So, we think we are in good shape for customers in the UK, and then also we think we're in great shape for customers that are in the EU that want to operate in the UK, and we're in great shape for UK customers that want to operate in the EU going forward. So, I do think from a cloud perspective, we provide some unique stuff there, and look forward to continue to help all of our customers. Other questions? Let's see here. A few more around. Some companies seem less nervous about cloud when their data isn't in their sovereign country. Related to that one, I'd say, I think one of the things that we're certainly seeing in the cloud space is I do think some companies are getting far more comfortable with the notion of running their apps all over the world because they are increasingly using apps and technology to reach a global customer audience. And so rather than necessarily have to always store the data in their country, increasingly they're realizing they have to store the data if they're targeting EU citizens in the EU, if they're targeting Australia citizens in Australia, if they're targeting Canadian citizens in Canada. And so, the nice thing about the cloud is it enables you to actually choose where you want to store the data. And cloud providers like Azure make very strong promises, which is if you store the data or persist the data in a particular cloud region, it only stays in that region or only stays in that country. That it gives you kind of a unique ability as a developer to meet any legislation and any data sovereignty or data residency requirements. And I do think that is going to be important going forward. And even, some of the most recent discussions and debates and controversy around privacy with social networking, I think attest to the fact that people and legislation is going to increasingly require safeguards around data that's being stored about users. And we're trying to make sure we really build our cloud to work well in that environment. Someone else asked about GDPR. For people who don't know, for people in Europe, you probably know this well. For a lot of people elsewhere around the world, you should know it, but sometimes don't. GDPR is a new legislation that's going into effect this May, so next month, and it's enforced by the EU, European Union, but it affects every company around the world if they sell to European customers. And it basically provides any citizen in the EU the right to be forgotten by a company. And so they can request this company, hey, please forget my information or please delete my information. And the company is legally obligated within a certain number of days to ensure that all that data has been deleted. And where it becomes interesting is if the company doesn't delete the data, the company can be fined 4% of their annual revenue per person. And so if you've got 25 people that ask to be forgotten and you don't, you have to give up 100% of your revenue over the last year and you go out of business. So it's got quite a bit of enforcement to it. And again, if you're selling any products that are used in Europe, you really need to pay attention to GDPR. Good news is Azure has a bunch of GDPR services specific to, first, actually the whole Microsoft Cloud is GDPR compliant. So if you use Office 365, Dynamics, or Azure, all of our services are GDPR compliant, but we also do have now some pretty unique and differentiated capabilities that enable you to build GDPR-based applications or GDPR compliant applications. And specifically, if you look at like our data services with SQL DB, which is one of our managed services inside Azure, this also works with SQL Server on-prem. Our data discovery and classification tools now make it possible for you to look across all your data in your databases, and it will automatically categorize any column or any piece of information that has emails, that has social security numbers, credit cards, phone numbers, or personally identifiable information, and allows you to label those columns as GDPR or as confidential. And then that makes it easier for you to actually have a governance model so that you can discover all the data, and then you can enforce policies around it to make sure you're compliant. So those are some unique things that we do. And again, all of the services we have in Azure will be GDPR compliant the day GDPR comes into effect. Other questions, a couple of IoT ones. What new Azure things can we look for to help us makers with our IoT projects? Well, what I can say is if you are looking at IoT in any way, shape, or form, I definitely recommend you come to Build next month, because we're going to talk a lot more about IoT there. And you'll see a lot in my keynote and in the breakout sections about what we're doing to enable you to build better IoT and better edge-based solutions. And so those include our Azure IoT service, and Azure IoT Hub, which enables you to easily securely register with a device, or register a device with it. And you can do things like management, patch update, you can deploy applications automatically through it onto that device, all in a secure, easily managed way. It works with both Windows and Linux-based devices, so you can use and real-time operating systems. So you can literally use it with everything. And it works also with what we call our Azure IoT Edge offering, which is a set of software you can run on the actual Edge device, and do things like serverless functions using Azure Functions. You can run containers and deploy containers from the cloud onto your device and run them. And it has a whole bunch of other built-in eventing and diagnostic and log capabilities. And we think it enables you to build far better IoT systems than you can before, and again, be able to run them and scale them everywhere. And we're going to talk a lot more about how that capability works going forward and how you can leverage it. Someone else asked questions about IoT, or sorry, about AI, and will you be able to run like cognitive services on the edge? When I say come to Build, and you'll probably hear more about, you definitely will hear more about how you can run AI on the edge, and integrate as part of that offering as well. Yeah, I think we have some pretty exciting stuff coming that we'll be talking about more. Someone asked, am I secretly behind all open source initiatives at Microsoft? If it was secret, I guess you wouldn't know. But I am involved in many of the open source initiatives, not all of them. Open source is something I believe in and have helped drive with both .NET, with Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, which is now one of the most popular open source projects on GitHub. I think between .NET Core and VS Code, I don't remember exactly where, but I think both are top 10 GitHub projects now in terms of engagement, which is great to see. And obviously with Azure, whether it's with our Kubernetes service, whether it's with our Spark and Hadoop services, whether it's around our Cassandra or Redis, as well as our MongoDB services and more. The nice thing is we have a really rich open source set of capabilities that are great for .NET developers, they're great for Java developers, they're great for Python, Go, Node, and other developers as well. I'm super excited to see that grow. And someone asked me, what is my favorite Microsoft open source project, the one that I'm most proud of accomplishing? It's a little bit like choosing which is your favorite child. I love both my kids equally. Yeah, I'd say for open source project, I mean, I think the two that I'm probably, or two that I'm particularly happy about would be .NET, just because I think that, going the journey that we did in terms of open sourcing .NET and having some of the energy that we're seeing around .NET Core right now, yeah, it's hard to take something that has not been open source and not only open source it, but really turn it into a vibrant, real open source community where it isn't just like you publish the source code, but you're taking pull requests, you're managing the project out in the open, and it really is both a Microsoft and community related project. That's hard to do when you have a very large, many million lines of code solution, and I think the team's done a great job with that. The other one I'd say is VS Code is another project which started off as open source, or started early as open source at the beginning, but it's been great to see that really take off. And it's interesting. I think a couple of years ago people said, oh, Visual Studio, it's only used for a subset of developers around the world. And now when you look at both Visual Studio, which on Windows is growing like crazy. You look at VS for Mac, which now also has a ton of usage, and through our Xamarin acquisition, and then now with VS Code, which is reaching new communities of people that many times have never used a Microsoft development tool. It's awesome to see that across the Visual Studio family now, we literally have millions of developers on all platforms that now log into Visual Studio every day and are using it for its projects. And it now is probably used. One of the VS family tools is probably now used, I think, by more than 2/3 of all developers in the world, which is a huge change over the last couple of years. So super excited about that. Is it true that I once owned a blue shirt? I did, but I burned it. So don't worry. No, I do actually own some shirts that are not red. I'm ironically am wearing a red shirt though today, or maybe not ironically, but so yeah, I do own shirts that are all other colors, but I do probably wear red more than blue. Dan asked a question about, can I talk to the new AI perception and mixed reality team? I think that I mentioned maybe 20 minutes ago at the beginning that we did do kind of a recent set of organizational changes here at Microsoft. And the AI teams around the company moved to work for me, including kind of a team that we just created we call kind of our AI perception and mixed reality team. And that team kind of combined a couple of different teams that we previously had around Microsoft. One was the HoloLens and the mixed reality teams that a lot of people know about. Another team is our speech team. That does speech detection, and people might not know that we do have speech recognition APIs inside Azure that we expose as cognitive services that you can call as a developer, and we use those for things like Cortana and Windows as well as Xbox as part of our solutions, and so that's now part of that same team. And then the third team we integrated was a team that's been focused on computer vision. So being able to do object detection, doing vision detection, OCR, and a wide variety of other visual-based capabilities. And the reason we have that team, and the reason it works for me is, as we think about new experiences that people are looking to build that are often cloud delivered or cloud connected, people are looking to be able to, not just sort of have a web app or a mobile app, but increasingly have a much more immersive experience. And in many cases, don't even think of it as an app, but rather think of it as like a car, or think of it like because it is a car, or think of it as any type of product that they're using either in a consumer or a commercial setting. And that's one of the things that we're looking to kind of enable to be much richer using these AI perception capabilities, so that you can speak naturally. It can actually do detection of both objects, even things like gaze tracking or eye tracking, say while you're driving, and be able to provide kind of much richer immersive experiences as part of it. And I think it's going to be pretty exciting over the next couple of months and years as we kind of expose that in a deeper way. And again, at the Build conference coming up, you'll see us talk much more about those services and what we're doing there. Let's see, a couple other ones. Lots of good questions here. Make sure. The question was, how can I write an Azure Logic app that I can monetize? I mean, how do you make it make money? And the question is, I think, around serverless computing and kind of experiences. No, it's a good question. I mean, generally on Azure we see, two classes of apps that people often build. There's more than two, but two in particular. One is if they work for a business and they're looking to, optimize the internal running of the business. And so things like Logic Apps, which is a service in Azure that lets you connect data across lots of different systems and uses a serverless-based model for how you can basically plug data together and integrate across systems. It's a great way that you can sort of automate and stitch business process together. So for example, you could create a Logic app that creates a workflow that runs so that, when you put something in a queue or you save something to a file system, it can go off and kick off a workflow. It could go talk to your CRM system, whether it's Dynamics or Salesforce. It could process that data and access an SAP system or a Dynamics ERP backend. And it could write to either, say, a Microsoft Teams or Slack channel as a bot, and do it all serverlessly. And that's great for a lot of enterprise and business scenarios where you want to create business automation. And then there's another whole class of apps that we see on Azure, which are really about connecting to customers and are often apps that developers build to sell to clients or other customers, whether it's in a commercial or in a consumer setting. And so in that world, you can use the same set of services like Logic Apps, build, say, a SaaS solution, or build an app that you then charge money for, and then you run it as a service, and someone's able to take advantage of it. And we generally see a pretty wide spectrum of customers and developers building solutions for both. And part of the power of Azure is, once you learn the services and the skills, you can easily target both in rich ways. So, a couple of questions here. Question was around .NET Core is totally awesome. Can it get better? It's fast approaching having full .NET framework compatibility, but once we get to that level, is there any more innovation that we can get beyond that? Well, first, I'm glad you think it's totally awesome. Do I think it can get better? Absolutely. I think one of the things, having been around in the .NET space for an awfully long time, anniversary happened, I think, in December or January of this past year, where we hit the 20th anniversary of when I wrote the first ASP.NET prototype. So I kind of feel like, wow, 20 years is a long time. But so it's been around 20 years since the first code for .NET was written. You're never done. That's the one thing I can say in the developer space is you're never done. And every time I thought maybe 18 years ago, there's nothing more to do, there's 18 years of existence that proof that there was a lot more to do. And I think similarly here, there's going to be even more we're going to do in the future. And as I think about .NET broadly, I think of it as a couple things. One is around obviously the runtime, and we continue to drive improvements in terms of performance, in terms of debugging experience, in terms of increasingly the distributed nature as you're running .NET potentially across multiple servers. You may be running it across clients and servers. You're running it in a serverless way. You're running it in containers. there's lots of new options for doing. You're running it on an iOS or Android phone. There's lots of new form factors that we're targeting and making sure that we run well. There's tons of innovation happening in the language level. If you look at the latest C#, or in the last 2 or 3 releases of C#, you can see kind of dramatic language improvements that are happening. And I think there's still more that we'll continue to do to make C# and other .NET languages an even more productive and more enjoyable, pleasurable programming experience. And then there's tons of opportunities with the frameworks and the tools. And I talked earlier a few minutes ago about AI as an example, or IoT scenarios as an example. The cool thing about .NET Core now being multi-platform, the fact that it runs on Windows and Linux, that it is open source, that it is small, that it can run on all these embedded devices, is you can now use .NET to literally embed code in any device on the planet, whether it's your car, whether it's a plane, whether it's aircraft engine, whether it's a lamp at home. All those systems are going to have code running on them. Hopefully you can't just be sitting on a plane and deploy code into the engine, but someone, Rolls-Royce or Boeing, is going to be writing IoT-based solutions, and they happen to actually, both those companies use Azure to do it. And having that flexibility as a .NET developer to build code that can run in any of those different form factors, and I think just provides a really exciting world for .NET going forward. And as we integrate more AI technology into Azure and into the edge and expose it with .NET, it also means that you can start to build cooler and cooler apps using the .NET skills that you already have. So, I think the future of .NET is super bright, and you're going to see there's a whole bunch more that we're going to be doing going forward. Let's see. Other questions? Just trying to go through some of them. Question was, I got asked recently by a company still using an old COBOL application if it would be possible to move that app as is into Azure without rewriting it. What plans have Microsoft got to allow old, out-of-date languages to be moved to modern technologies? I think one thing is code never dies, and so COBOL is still alive and well. One stunning statistic I saw recently was that there's more COBOL solutions in the world today, in terms of by volume, than there were 30 years ago, which is sort of mind-blowing. As a percentage, they become smaller in terms of code, but in terms of number of solutions built with COBOL, believe it or not, it's going up, not down. One of the things that we're trying to do is make sure it's really easy to use any language you want with Azure. And so we actually do have a number of COBOL as well as mainframe migration services that are built by partners and literally allow you to package up COBOL code and mainframe code and actually modernize it and run it in a cloud-based environment. So yeah, you can do that with Azure today. Other questions? This was that I love .NET Core. It's fantastic the way it's going. With .NET Core and Azure, is there still a place in the market for Xamarin and Mono and everything else? I think there's definitely a huge place in the market for Xamarin. In some ways, the Xamarin technology, I think the one thing to think about is what is Xamarin? I think of Xamarin when it was a separate company as sort of 3 things. One is a framework for building both iOS and Android-based apps using C#. The other was a runtime that they had, which is based on Mono for running those. And the third is the development tools, Xamarin Studio. And how those are evolving is on 3 dimensions. The tools, previously Xamarin Studio, is now Visual Studio. And so we now provide Xamarin built in for all Visual Studio customers. And we have evolved the Xamarin Studio code base to become Visual Studio for Mac. And now we have one Visual Studio team that builds both Visual Studio for Windows, Visual Studio for Mac, as well as Visual Studio Code. And you're seeing lots and lots of technology sharing there's some specific code for each, but going forward, you're seeing us basically share more and more of the tooling code across all three environments. You'll continue to see us push hard on that. Xamarin as a framework is also absolutely something we're investing heavily in, and is running now on iOS, Android, and it's writing to the .NET standard, which .NET Core also supports. The goal being that you can build Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android client experiences using as much shared code as possible. And then the third is on the runtime side. Xamarin on iOS and Android still use Mono as the runtime because the Mono team did a whole bunch of work specific to precompile code and run it in a iOS and Android environment. And over time, I think you'll see us converge the .NET Core runtime and some of those unique capabilities that Mono is doing for iOS and Android even more. And so, we continue to have a Mono team, but it is part of the broader .NET team. You'll see continued convergence of the execution environment. Even this past weekend, there were some good blog posts around Unity and some of the work that Unity is doing to move on to .NET Core. That's things, they used to be Mono-based, now they're running on .NET Core. Again, part of the overall effort is, we're trying to unify our execution environments and the core CLR runtime environments and be able to share code and be able to use it everywhere. Xamarin is alive and well, and all the goodness in Mono we're trying to bring into .NET Core, and also have a seamless story there as well. Let's see, questions coming in. Question, it seems like one question is around, for Windows development, what does some of the organizational changes we made, I mentioned that, for example, the Windows Core OS team joined my organization the last 2 weeks. The question is, what does it mean for Windows? Are we de-emphasizing Windows and Windows Client? The answer is there, no. We're not de-emphasizing Windows. Windows obviously continues to be the most popular desktop and user operating system out there, and that is a hugely important thing to hundreds of millions of people around the world today. And we've seen tremendous success with Windows 10 in terms of adoption, and we literally now have over 500 million people using it on a daily basis, using the most recent version of Windows, which is a phenomenal accomplishment. And you're going to see us continue to push hard, and part of the goal with the organizational changes is I'm going to be spending even more time on the client developer programming experience, both for Windows desktop, and when I say desktop, I mean laptop and tablets and all the other form factors. But also, we will be spending even more time also thinking about using Windows as an edge capability that can power new form factors beyond what you think of as a traditional PC, laptop, or tablet. And being able to kind of take the goodness of what we have with Windows, the tremendous device richness and ecosystem built up around it, and then all the rich management security capabilities it provides. I think it's going to provide even more opportunity for developers as well as for customers to be able to use Windows even more. So definitely no de-emphasis at all. If anything, I'm hoping we have an even brighter future ahead of us, and really excited to be part of it. Other questions here. You could choose, what are you wanting to achieve and be remembered by? Being remembered by sounds like disappearing, which hopefully isn't the case anytime soon. Gosh, remembered by is a deep question. I think the thing I always try to focus on is, hey, how do I build hopefully cool stuff that people like using and can make others more successful when they build apps on top of it. And so, I think my goal isn't to sort of have statues built to me, but more, I always get a kick when I do like one of my Redshirt dev tours and go speaking or do an event like this is, hearing about the different solutions that people have built, and hopefully how, if I've helped make some of projects and companies that you work for better, and hopefully make some of your lives better, then that makes me feel great. So I guess that would be that. Let's see, other questions. Greenfield project, why should I choose Azure over AWS? From Brett. Good question, Brett. I mean, I think for a couple of reasons choose Azure. Broadly, I think one of the things is just from a developer experience now. If you look at the end-to-end experience that we have across, whether it's around our data services with things like Cosmos DB that let you do kind of a globally distributed database, that's something that you can't easily do with AWS or other platforms. And we have a unique set of performance guarantees and around SLAs around Cosmos DB that are very unique, whether it's around IoT projects, with our IoT hub and with our IoT services. I think we also have now some really unique services that no other cloud provider has. And then, just from a developer experience perspective, whether it's with Azure App Service for building web apps, which now supports not just Windows-based apps, but Linux as well as Docker-based solutions as well. I think people that have looked at that have said, wow, this is the best way to build web backends. You look at our new Azure Kubernetes service that will be go much bigger on even in the next month. We have some really unique ways where you can leverage Kubernetes, you can leverage a container-based ecosystem, you can do auto updates of your Kubernetes environment, you can do built-in monitoring and scale out, and we now have a whole bunch of capabilities that AWS doesn't have in that space. You look at things like our developer tools, both Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, but also things like our Visual Studio Team Services, so that if you want to set up CI/CD, if you want to do Kanban boards and Agile project management, and really have a DevOps release process, you can now go into the Azure portal, click Create DevOps Project, and whether it's for .NET, whether it's for Java, Node, PHP, Python, you can literally set up an end-to-end CI/CD pipeline and release management solution in 3 minutes or less, and have that all work across all your capabilities. And so, I think from a developer experience perspective, we have something that's pretty unique, and obviously we're continuing to drive it forward, and it's really applicable. And then, even if it's a greenfield project, there's also a decent chance you're connecting to an existing system that's already out there. And one of the things that also makes Azure very unique is around the hybrid support that we have, and the fact that you can very easily integrate with systems that you already have on premises, or maybe your customers have on premises. You can use a single security model for both your on-prem and in the cloud using Azure AD. You can very easily do data migrations using our SQL database service, as well as which gives you 100% compatibility with existing SQL Server solutions and tools. And you can integrate with things like Logic Apps. So if you have an SAP environment or a Salesforce system or a Dynamics system, you can basically pull and exchange data in a secure way across them and build end-to-end workflows. So a lot of unique things. Again, definitely recommend that you can take advantage of, and definitely recommend watch the build keynote coming up, and then lots of my other talks are online, and hopefully get a chance to see it in action and give it a try. Let's see. Other questions. How do I feel about Elon? Say, AI killing us all. It was Elon Musk. What do we do in Azure to prevent that Terminator future? Well, I don't think AI is going to kill us all. or at least that's certainly my goal. I think AI is an incredibly powerful technology. I mean, I think it's something that's also not super understood, because there's a certain science fiction element of AI in terms of machines having kind of behavioral of their own. Part of what AI is powerful, though, is to look at patterns of data and be able to, instead of you having to program, conditional logic, do this versus that, how do you actually have the capability so that you can take data from the past and use it to understand patterns of the past better, and in turn make predictions for the future. And so, the way that, say, speech detection works is you train a model with lots of linguistics and words of the past. And it now allows you to kind of be able to predict what someone is saying, or not predict, but you basically hear what someone is saying and be able to transcribe it with a great deal of accuracy. Similarly, in terms of looking at patterns around even like things like eventing or logging, when you have an app. In the past, sometimes you'd wait for people to complain that there's an issue, or you're just looking at HTTP 500 errors to know that there's an issue inside your app, and then you have to respond. The nice thing with AI now is you can just take your log telemetry from your app or your diagnostics, and it can actually predict, even before you get to an error state, hey, your system is starting to perform slower, or response time has gone down by 10 or 15%. That might be indicative of a change, and it might be correlated to this code you just checked in. Again, it's not a machine that is sort of thinking in a cognitive sense and self-aware. It's more just an algorithm that's been trained based on data that can actually hopefully make your life better. And so, I think most of the AI scenarios that we're going to see are really around those type of augmentation capabilities, and be able to leverage it. And obviously, we got to be super careful how we use the data. I think I worry less about computers coming to alive and killing us. Someone said people who built Skynet didn't think it would kill them either. Sure, we do need to worry about that, I guess, maybe. I think the bigger one that we are going to need to worry about as an industry, and I think it is something that you'll see us continue to push, is making sure that as we take data and we train new AI algorithms, that we actually are very explicit of what is the bias in the data. And all data has some degree of bias, meaning if all your data is coming from customers in a particular location, or all the data is coming from the most recent versions of your products and not the old versions of the products, there is implicitly in that data some bias, meaning it's not perfect in terms of equivalency. And I think one of the things that's just important as you implement AI is be aware of what is the potential source of bias in your data, and what does that cause you to potentially mispredict in terms of whether it's logging accuracy, or whether it's around customer recommendations, or whether it's around even speech. If you have everyone that speaks in a North American, or even say in the US, if there's different regional dialects, if you then take that speech algorithm and you use it for someone in the UK or someone in Australia, it won't actually be as accurate, because there are differences, and if the data is biased, it's not going to correctly interpret what it sees. And I actually think that, for a lot of people, is going to be something that all of us developers need to make sure we understand, because if you start integrating AI into your apps and there is that bias, you can start to have weird things happen. I don't think it'll cause the computer to try to kill you, but you can actually have mistakes be made, and that is something that I think you'll hear us talk a lot more about in the future, to raise the awareness of. And then we're also looking at making sure in our tools and platforms, again, how do we help you detect that and make sure you don't inadvertently run into it. Let's see, other things in the last 3 minutes here. Is there any plan to horizontally scale SQL Server? Haresh asked. Yes, we are actually doing work to scale SQL Server. In fact, we do a bunch of scaling work around SQL today. when you run, for example, SQL DB service today, we do run it always on multiple physical servers, and for high availability purposes. And then even as we think about our transaction log capabilities, as we think about read replicas and read scale out, that is something we're now doing in a horizontally scalable way. And you'll see us kind of add more and more horizontal scale out capabilities to our data products in general in the future, even more. SQL obviously with the relational model, honors the relational model. And, part of the goal of the relational model is to kind of enforce correctness at the schema level. And we do certainly see lots and lots of benefits from that. And so there are always going to be some operations that, because of that correctness, is going to impose some not limitations, but some constraints as you do horizontal scale out. But there's tons of operations where you don't either have that requirement, or for read scenarios, you can sometimes relax slightly those requirements and get dramatically better scale benefits as you go out horizontally from a scale footprint perspective. And so, yeah, you are going to see us do a lot more of that in the future, and expect to hear us talk more about that going forward. Let's see.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah. Oh, we're out of time, aren't we?
Out of time, yeah. I've been pinging you, but I thought I will not interrupt you because you were on such a good roll.
Sure, my pleasure. Well, it's gone by quickly. It's been fun to do the talk, and I hope people get a good chance to hear it and enjoy it, and I hope we get to do another one again soon. It's been great fun to do.
And everybody here wants to say thank you, and I'm going to keep in touch with both Emily and your crew to see if we can't get you back again when you have another opening.
Sounds good. Yeah, and thanks everyone for joining and for all the great questions that were asked. I really appreciate it, and again, look forward to talking more in the months ahead.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, and have a fantastic day.
Great. Thanks. You too. Take care.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for attending and for all your fantastic questions. It's been rewarding, revealing, and most importantly, entertaining. And most of us have probably learned a little bit today. So thank you for coming in, and see you again next time.
And don't forget also, as with all of our presentations, folks, give us an hour or two. This will get converted into some web format, lovely pixels, and it'll end up on youtube.com/LIDNUG with the rest of us. And on that point, 3, 2, 1.